My name is Doris Patterson, and I am 73 years old. For the past 15 years, I've been living in what I believed was my own home in the suburbs of Denver, Colorado. I say believed because today I discovered something that changed everything I thought I knew about my life, my family, and myself. This is the story of how I became invisible in my own house and how I found my voice when it mattered the most. Before we go on, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel Vintage Revenge Stories. We're building a community of amazing women who know that our best chapters can happen at any age. Now, let's get back to the story. It all began on a Tuesday morning in March. I remember it clearly because the daffodils I planted 20 years ago were just starting to bloom in the front yard. I was sitting in what used to be my favorite chair, the blue velvet one my late husband George bought me for our 40th wedding anniversary, when my son Michael walked right past me. Nothing unusual, you might think, but he was carrying a stack of papers and talking on the phone about the property and market value. He didn't even glance in my direction. "The old woman won't be a problem much longer," he said into the phone, his voice low but not low enough. "She barely knows what day it is." My heart skipped a beat. Old woman. Was he talking about me? I watched him disappear into what used to be George's office, now converted into Michael's home office. My son had moved in after his divorce 3 years ago, bringing along his new girlfriend, Jessica. At first, I was grateful for the company. The house had felt so empty after George died, but lately, things had been different. Strange. I would find my mail already opened before I could get to it. Bills that were supposed to be in my name started arriving addressed to Michael. Whenever I asked, Jessica would pat my hand patronizingly and say, "Don't worry about those boring papers, Doris. Michael takes care of everything now." That Tuesday morning, something inside me shifted. Maybe it was the way Michael talked about me as if I weren't even human, or maybe it was the realization that I'd been sleepwalking through my own life. I decided to start paying attention. I began slowly. I listened more carefully to conversations that stopped abruptly when I entered a room. I noticed how Jessica would snap her laptop shut whenever I walked by, how they exchanged glances when I mentioned wanting to visit my sister in Phoenix or redecorate the living room. The first real clue came on a Thursday night. Jessica was cooking dinner, something she rarely did, and I offered to help. She was strangely chatty, almost friendly. "You know, Doris," she said, stirring a pot of soup, "Michael and I have been thinking, this house is so big for just the 3 of us. Have you ever considered moving somewhere smaller? Maybe one of those retirement communities?" A chill ran down my spine. "This is my home, Jessica. George and I bought it in 1978. I raised Michael here." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Of course. I just meant for convenience. Less upkeep, more activities with people your age." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Jessica's words, Michael's phone call, all the little changes I had brushed aside. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I went through my important documents. What I found in my bedroom safe made my blood run cold. The deed to my house, the home George and I had paid off completely in 2010, was no longer in my name. According to the papers I found, I had supposedly transferred ownership to Michael 2 years earlier. I stared at the documents, my hands trembling. The signature looked like mine, but I had absolutely no memory of signing anything like that. I sat on my bed until dawn, trying to piece together what had happened. 2 years ago, I had suffered a minor stroke. Nothing serious, the doctor said, but I was confused for a few weeks. Michael had been so helpful then, taking me to appointments, handling my paperwork. I was grateful. I trusted him completely. Now I realized that trust had been my biggest mistake. The next morning, I called my lawyer, or tried to. When I dialed the number I'd had for James Morrison for over 20 years, a recording said the line was no longer in service. I tried directory assistance. James Morrison had retired, they told me. His office had been sold. Panic welled up in my chest. I needed help, but I didn't know who to turn to. My sister lived nearly 2,000 miles away. The few friends I had left were all struggling with their own health problems. I had become so isolated, so dependent on Michael and Jessica for everything. Then I remembered something George used to tell me. Doris, you're stronger than you think. You just have to stop letting other people convince you otherwise. I decided to start my own investigation. Over the next few days, I paid close attention to everything happening in what I was beginning to think of as my former home. I noticed Jessica spent a lot of time on real estate websites. She would quickly minimize the screen when I passed by, but I caught glimpses of listings for luxury apartments downtown. I also noticed that mail addressed to me was being intercepted. I began checking the mailbox before they woke up, and that's when I found the first real piece of evidence. It was a letter from a bank I had never heard of, addressed to me, but clearly opened by someone else. Inside was a statement showing a $150,000 home equity loan taken out against my property just 6 months earlier. My supposed signature was at the bottom of the loan documents. I felt sick. Not only had they stolen my house, but they had also borrowed money against it, money I was supposedly responsible for paying back. That afternoon, while Michael was at work and Jessica at her part-time job at the boutique, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called a taxi and went downtown to the public library. At 73, I wasn't exactly tech-savvy, but the librarian was patient with me. Together, we searched for information about elder financial abuse, forged documents, and my legal rights. What I learned both terrified and empowered me. According to everything I read, what had happened to me was more common than I had ever imagined. Adult children taking advantage of aging parents, especially after health scares or periods of confusion. The websites called it elder financial exploitation, and it was a serious crime. I also learned that just because documents had been filed didn't mean they were valid. Forgery was forgery, no matter if it came from a stranger or from your own son. But I needed proof, and I needed help from someone I could trust. That night, I did something that surprised even me. While Michael and Jessica were watching TV in the living room, I announced that I was going to bed early. Instead, I went into Michael's office. My heart was pounding as I carefully rifled through the drawers of his desk. In the bottom drawer, hidden beneath some old tax returns, I found a folder that made my hands shake with rage. Inside were copies of all the documents transferring my assets to Michael. But there were also emails between him and Jessica, outlining what they called Operation Independence. The emails dated back over a year, long before my stroke. They had been planning this for a very long time. One email from Jessica stood out in particular. Once we get the house in your name, we can take out the home equity loan and start looking for apartments. The old hag will never find out. We just need to keep her confused and dependent a little longer." Another from Michael read, "I'm researching nursing homes. There's one about an hour away that accepts Medicaid. Once she's placed there, we can sell the house and move on with our lives." I photographed every document with my old digital camera, something George had bought me years ago that I'd barely used. My hands were shaking so badly, it took several tries before I could get clear shots. The next morning, I called in sick to my volunteer shift at the hospital gift shop. The first time I had lied about anything in years. Instead, I took another taxi, this time to the offices of Legal Aid for Seniors. The attorney I met, a young woman named Sarah Chen, listened to my story with growing anger. She examined the photos I had printed at the library and shook her head. "Mrs. Patterson, this is clearly elder abuse and fraud. These signatures don't even look like they were written by the same person. And taking out loans without your knowledge or consent, that's theft, plain and simple." For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. "But," Sarah continued, "building a case will take time. In the meantime, you need to protect yourself. Do you have a safe place to stay?" I thought about it. I had a small amount of money tucked away in a checking account Michael didn't know about. My rainy day fund. George had always insisted I keep separate. It wasn't much, but it might be enough for a hotel for a few days. "What should I do first?" I asked. Sarah gave me a list: file a police report, contact the bank about the fraudulent loan, gather any additional evidence I could find, and, most importantly, do not let Michael or Jessica know what I was doing until we were ready to act. "Surprise is your biggest advantage right now," she warned. That afternoon, I went to the police station. The detective I spoke with, a middle-aged man named Rodriguez, was kind but realistic. "These family cases are always complicated," he told me. "We'll investigate, but it may take time to build a solid case. Document everything from here on out. Record conversations if you can do it legally. And be careful. People who commit this kind of fraud can become dangerous once they realize they've been caught." His words sent a chill through me, but they also strengthened my resolve. Over the next 2 weeks, I lived a double life. By day, I pretended to be the confused, helpless old woman Michael and Jessica expected me to be. But secretly, I was gathering evidence. I learned to use the voice recorder app on the basic smartphone Michael had bought me for emergencies. I captured Jessica talking to a friend about the luxury apartment with city views she'd be moving into soon. I recorded Michael discussing with someone how to manage the old woman's medical care to keep me compliant. The most damning evidence came by accident. One night, Jessica got a phone call she clearly didn't want Michael to hear. She stepped out into the backyard to take it, not realizing I was in the kitchen garden. "No, the plan is still on track," I heard her say. "The old lady doesn't suspect a thing. Michael's handling the nursing home paperwork this week. Yes, I know about the insurance policy. That's phase 2 after we get her placed. We just have to be patient a little longer. Insurance policy. My life insurance had listed George as the beneficiary, and after his death, it was supposed to go to charity. I had made that clear to Michael years ago. The next day, while they were both out, I searched Michael's office more thoroughly. Hidden in a folder labeled Mom's Doctor, I found documents showing that Michael had somehow changed the beneficiary of my life insurance policy to himself. There were also applications for increased coverage that I had never signed. A wave of nausea swept over me. They weren't just planning to steal my house and lock me away in a nursing home. They were planning for me to die there. That night, I called Sarah Chen from the hotel room I had begun renting under a false name. I told her about the insurance policy and Jessica's phone call. "Mrs. Patterson, you need to get out of that house immediately," she said. "This has escalated beyond financial abuse. I'm calling Detective Rodriguez tonight." "But I need more evidence," I protested. "You already have enough evidence to begin legal proceedings, and more than enough to be concerned for your safety. Pack what you need and don't go back there alone." The next morning, I followed Sarah's advice. I told Michael and Jessica I was going out shopping. Instead, I went to my hotel, gathered the evidence I had collected, and prepared for the confrontation I knew was coming. Sarah had arranged for Detective Rodriguez to meet us at the house that afternoon. The plan was simple: confront Michael and Jessica with the evidence while the detective was present, and formally serve them with the legal papers Sarah had prepared. At 3:20 p.m., I walked through the front door of the house I had lived in for over 40 years, followed by Sarah and Detective Rodriguez. Michael was in his office. Jessica was in the kitchen. They both froze when they saw me with strangers. "Michael, Jessica," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "We need to talk." Michael's face went pale. "Mom, what's going on? Who are these people?" Detective Rodriguez stepped forward. "Mr. Patterson, I'm Detective Rodriguez with the Denver Police Department. We're here to discuss allegations of elder abuse and financial fraud." I watched Jessica's face crumble. She gripped the kitchen counter for support. "I don't know what you're talking about," Michael said, but his voice was trembling. Sarah opened her briefcase. "Mr. Patterson, we have extensive evidence that you and Miss Jessica forged your mother's signature on multiple documents, illegally transferred her property, and took out loans in her name without her knowledge or consent." She spread out copies of the documents I had found, including the emails I had photographed. "We also have recorded conversations indicating that you were planning to place Mrs. Patterson in a nursing home against her will, and that you may have altered her life insurance policy." Michael's face shifted from pale to crimson. "She's my mother. I was trying to help her. She had a stroke. She was confused. Help me by stealing my house." I finally found my voice. "By planning to lock me in a nursing home so you could sell my property and move into a luxury apartment." Jessica burst into tears. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. We just needed some money to get started. We were going to take care of you." Take care of me. I felt 40 years of suppressed anger rise up. "You called me an old hag in your emails. You planned to declare me incompetent so you could control everything I owned." Detective Rodriguez stepped in. "Mr. Patterson, Miss Jessica, you are under arrest for elder abuse, fraud, and forgery." As Michael and Jessica were read their rights, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Power. Not power over others, but power over my own life. The months that followed were difficult but liberating. The legal process was slow and emotionally exhausting. Michael hired an expensive lawyer and tried to argue he was acting in my best interest. Jessica eventually agreed to testify against him in exchange for a lighter sentence. The house was restored to my name. The fraudulent loan was cancelled. My life insurance policy was returned to its original terms, but more importantly, I was no longer invisible. During the trial, I testified about what it was like to be dismissed, ignored, and treated as though I were already dead. I spoke about how easy it is for older people to become isolated and vulnerable. The local paper covered the story, and I was contacted by several organizations working to prevent elder abuse. Michael was sentenced to 3 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution. Jessica received 2 years and community service. I felt sadness for Michael. He was still my son, but I had no regrets about reporting him. What they did was wrong, regardless of family ties. The day after sentencing, I did something I hadn't done in years. I redecorated the living room. I got rid of that blue velvet armchair. It carried too many memories of feeling powerless. Instead, I bought a bright red recliner that faces the window overlooking my garden. I also did something else I hadn't done in years. I made new friends. The support group for elder abuse survivors introduced me to people who understood what I had been through. We began meeting regularly, not just to share our experiences, but to help other seniors recognize the warning signs. 6 months after the trial ended, I received a letter from Michael in prison. He apologized and said he was in therapy. He claimed he never meant for things to go so far. I wrote back, telling him I forgave him. But forgiveness does not erase consequences. Jessica also reached out, wanting to make amends. I agreed to meet her once in a public place. She cried and apologized, saying she had gotten caught up in Michael's plans and never thought about how much it was hurting me. I told her I appreciated the apology, but that she needed to understand I was a real person with real feelings, not an obstacle to her dreams. A year after it all began, I was invited to speak at a conference on elder abuse. Standing at that podium, looking out at hundreds of social workers, lawyers, and family members, I realized how far I had come. The thing about becoming invisible, I told them, is that it doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process. First, people stop asking your opinion. Then they stop including you in decisions that affect your life. Eventually, they stop seeing you as a person. I paused, thinking back to that Tuesday morning when I overheard Michael's phone call. But here's what I've learned. Sometimes, invisibility is a choice we make. We choose to stay silent when someone dismisses us. We choose to accept mistreatment because we don't want to cause trouble. We choose to let others make decisions for us because it feels easier. The audience was completely silent. I'm not saying it's easy to speak up, especially when the people mistreating us are family. But I am saying it's possible. It's never too late to find your voice. It's never too late to demand respect. It's never too late to refuse to be invisible. After my speech, a woman my age approached me. Her name was Margaret, and she told me her adult daughter had been controlling her finances for years. I felt like something was wrong, she said, but I kept telling myself I was imagining it. After hearing your story, I think I need to look at my bank statements more carefully. 3 months later, Margaret called me to say she had discovered her daughter had been stealing from her for over 5 years. With my help, and with Sarah Chen's legal assistance, Margaret was able to recover most of her money and set boundaries with her daughter. Today, as I tell this story 2 years after it all began, I am sitting in my red recliner looking out at my garden. The daffodils are blooming again, but this time they remind me of renewal instead of the beginning of my nightmare. My house is truly mine again. My finances are under my control. The beneficiary of my life insurance policy is once more the charity I chose. But most importantly, I am no longer invisible. I volunteer 3 days a week with legal aid for seniors, helping other older adults who find themselves in situations like mine. I've learned that my story is not unique. Elder abuse affects millions of seniors every year. But I've also learned that with the right support and determination, it is possible to fight back and reclaim your life. Michael was released from prison last month. He sent me a letter asking if we could meet. I'm still thinking about it. Forgiveness is complicated when it comes to family, especially when trust has been so thoroughly broken. But I've learned that forgiveness does not mean forgetting or pretending what happened didn't matter. Jessica moved to another state after her release and sent me a Christmas card last year. I didn't respond, but I didn't throw it away either. Some wounds heal completely. Others leave scars that serve as reminders. The most important thing I've learned through this entire experience is that age doesn't make you invisible. Allowing others to treat you as though you don't matter does. And that's a choice you can undo at any time. Every morning when I wake up in my house, I remind myself that I am not invisible. I am Doris Patterson. I am 75 years old. I survived the betrayal of my own son. I fought against people who tried to steal my life, and I discovered that I am stronger than I ever knew. Most days that feels like enough. Some days it feels like everything. If you're listening to this and you recognize yourself in my story, if you feel invisible in your own life, if family members or caregivers are making decisions for you without your consent, if you suspect that someone may be taking advantage of you, please understand this. It is not too late to speak up. You don't have to wait until someone tries to steal your home to realize that your voice matters. You don't have to wait until someone calls you old to understand that you deserve respect. You are not invisible. You matter. And it is never too late to remind the world of that truth. The betrayal almost destroyed me, but in a strange way, it also saved me. It forced me to uncover a strength I didn't know I still had. It taught me that the opposite of invisible isn't just visible, it's powerful. And that I've learned makes all the difference. Share your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your perspective. And if this story made you reflect, give this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more real and powerful stories like this one. Because in the end, every story is an opportunity to see life through new eyes.